Positive persuasion, motivating the subject to tell the truth. Positive persuasion consists of a variety of persuasive statements offered by the investigator to motivate, influence, and persuade the subject to tell the truth. In the Reid technique, positive persuasion occurs when the information developed during the investigative interview and the investigation indicate the subject's probable involvement in the commission of the act that's under investigation. The information developed during the interview is used to construct a strategy for the positive persuasion phase and elicit the truth from the subject using logic, sound reasoning, understanding, empathy, rationalization, and minimization. Positive persuasion consists of 7 steps, including overcoming resistance, addressing the subject's fears, and establishing details. The centerpiece of the 7 steps is step 2, the development of persuasive statements, also referred to in some instances as theme development. There are 3 building blocks essential to the development of effective persuasive statements, and they are allowing the subject to save face. Secondly, understanding how and where the subject is shifting the blame for their actions. And thirdly, understanding what types of behavior the subject perceives as being worse than the act that they committed, which will allow the investigator to use that as a credible contrast. The following real-life case illustrates these 3 building blocks. A female employee named Mary embezzled $20,000 from a pharmacy where she was employed as a cashier. She stole approximately $150 per week, oftentimes in increments of $50 over a period of 3 years. Mary rang up false returns on her cash register to cover up the money that she stole from the register. Following are the details of the positive persuasion phase with Mary regarding the theft of money from the pharmacy. This example will illustrate how information developed during Mary's interview was used in the techniques that helped investigators elicit the truth from Mary. Building block number 1, allowing the subject to save face. Investigators are most successful in the art of persuasion if they can tap into the subject's pre-existing justifications or rationalizations. These rationalizations will allow the subject to maintain a credible psychological excuse for their actions. The investigator should try to use the same rationalizations revealed during the interview to uncover the perceived justification for the act. So, for example, in this instance, Mary said her husband recently lost his job and that they were having difficulty keeping their heads above water, especially since the twins were born. She also stated she had cashed several personal checks from the funds in the register, even though she knew it was against company policy. She also stated that she witnessed several other employees cashing checks in the same manner, and she didn't think the policy forbidding this behavior was being enforced. It didn't seem anyone was paying attention. By utilizing these rationalizations in the persuasive statements, the investigator will appear sympathetic to the subject's situation. However, the investigator's words will not legally justify the suspect's behavior. In Mary's case, the investigator said the following: Mary, I understand how difficult things are these days. The economy's tough for everyone. Companies are merging, and as a result, good, hard-working people like your husband are losing their jobs through no fault of their own. It's hard to make ends meet when a 2-income family becomes a 1-income family. Just because a person makes a mistake in judgment does not mean that that is a dishonest person or a thief. I think the reason honest people like you do this type of thing is because they are thinking about the well-being of their family, and sometimes just act out of desperation. However, sometimes we do run into people who are simply dishonest and get jobs for the sole purpose of trying to find ways to rip the company off. They will take as much as they can and think of no one but themselves. Now, you certainly don't seem like that kind of a person to me. In the short time I've had a chance to get to know you, Mary, you seem like a very nice person, a loving mother, and probably a very reliable employee. But sometimes life circumstances get the better of us, and even the most honest person might make a mistake in judgment and do something that is out of character for them. That's what I would like to think about you, Mary, but I can't know that for sure unless it comes from you. By appealing to the subject's justification for her actions that she implicitly revealed in earlier answers about her struggles, that statement could motivate the subject to want to tell the truth. Building block number 2 is shifting the blame. Eliciting the truth from a subject requires a shift in the blame so that the burden is psychologically lifted from that person who committed the act. During the interview, remember, Mary stated that she witnessed other employees cashing personal checks from the register funds and that the company was not enforcing their policy prohibiting that kind of behavior. So the subject's perception would suggest that she would not have embezzled any money from the company if they were more diligent in enforcing their own policies. Her perception also suggests that she would not have embezzled for 3 years if the company had better auditing controls and discovered the fraud earlier. She is essentially blaming the company's poor controls for her embezzlement. The statement she made in the interview implied that it's the company's fault. The interviewer appealed to this shift of blame by making a statement similar to the following. Mary, I'm sure when you started working here, the last thing you ever thought you would do was take money without authorization from the company. But after you started working here and saw other people cashing personal checks with the register funds, you decided that, you could do that as well. If the company had been more diligent about enforcing their policies forbidding employees from cashing personal checks with register funds, you would have never started doing this. I think there was one time where maybe you needed some money and you had forgotten your checkbook at home. My guess is you took the money and planned on putting a check in the following day. But since no one said anything about there being a shortage in the drawer, you just never got around to putting that check in to cover the money you removed. If the organization had better controls, you would have not continued this kind of behavior for 3 years. This should have been caught early before things got out of control. Building block 3, credible contrast. Building block number 3 is for the investigator to offer a credible contrast or a crime more serious than the issue that is currently under investigation. During Mary's interview, she acknowledged cashing personal checks from the funds in the register and witnessed other employees doing the same. There's a strong likelihood that Mary was trying to convince herself that she was going to try to pay the money back someday because without this rationalization, she'd have to look at herself as just a thief. Another credible contrast, given the nature of this investigation, would be to compare taking money to stealing drugs from the pharmacy and then selling them out on the street. Using this information, the investigator developed the following statement. Mary, after your husband is laid off, you probably had a hard time paying bills and needed extra money just to make ends meet. I think at the beginning you had the intention of paying the money back, but things got away from you, and before you knew it, you were in too deep. Sometimes we just get into bad habits and we don't know how to stop ourselves. The important thing is to understand what type of person you are, Mary. Are you an honest person who just made a mistake in judgment due to the pressures you were under? Or a thief who got the job here with the sole purpose of trying to rip the place off and maybe get involved in more serious things like taking drugs from the pharmacy? I've talked to employees working here at the pharmacy in the past who are taking drugs to the pharmacy and selling them out on the street. I certainly don't think you're that kind of a person. But these days, you just don't know for sure. I am doing everything I can to give you a chance to straighten the situation out and explain what your intentions were. I think you always had the intention of paying the money back, but things got away from you, and now you're scared and don't know what to do. Motivating a subject to want to tell the truth is at the heart of these investigative techniques. Most subjects do not think of themselves as bad people regardless of the seriousness of their behavior. Mary, for instance, does not want the company to think she's a thief who got the job specifically to embezzle $20,000. Mary hopes the company will understand that she is an honest person and a good employee who used bad judgment due to the circumstances she found herself in that were completely beyond her control. Most people perceive themselves as victims and want someone to understand their pain. They want someone to understand the circumstances that they were in. Mary knows that she is not going to simply walk away and not suffer any consequences. She knows she's going to face consequences, but she would like the decision makers to understand the extenuating events before any final decision is made. It should be stated very clearly here that investigators cannot and should not try to absolve the subject of wrongdoing. Investigators should also make it clear to the subject that they are not promising any leniency. A statement such as the following should be made by the investigator. Mary, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that just because you tell the truth and say you're sorry that nothing's going to happen to you. I would be a liar if I said that. I'm not the one who's going to make that decision. However, the decision makers will make the decision based on the information I put in my report. And right now, the only information I have in my report at this point are the cold, hard facts as to what happened. I don't have anything regarding your explanation or whether you were sorry about this. That has to come from you. I think you understand at this point that the decision makers are going to have to make a determination with or without any explanation from you. Mary, what frame of mind do you want them to be in when they make that decision? Thinking the best about you or thinking the worst? Shortly after the investigator provided this explanation, Mary confessed to the crime, providing corroborating details of when she took the money, how she did it, what she spent it on, etc. Using positive persuasion to motivate a subject to desire to tell the truth allows a person to acknowledge their wrongdoing and at the same time avoid humiliation and maintain some dignity. It is a humane way to deal with the difficult problem of work-related misconduct with an employee. Subjects may not remember all the investigator said, but they will remember how they were treated. To supplement this presentation, we also recommend that you view the following presentations on our YouTube channel: Empathy and Understanding, and Projection and Rationalization. We offer a 3-day training course called the Reid Technique of Investigative Interviewing and Positive Persuasion. On our website at reid.com, you'll see our full schedule. Thank you very much for taking a few minutes to view this presentation.